My name is Nick Palmer. I'm from presently now live in Morganton and born and raised. Actually, I was born just a couple blocks from here in the original Grace Hospital. And my parents' home at that time until they died would be in Valdez, North Carolina. My father was a physician, my mother a registered nurse. They came in 1933. I was born in 36, 23 January 36. And as I've said in the past, I've always had a mailing address in Valdez for 79 years. And soon it'll be 80 years. And I went to school there in Valdez for the first couple of years, a grammar school, and then my parents would send me to prep school for the latter part of grammar school. High school, I went to a prep school in Asheville, North Carolina, Asheville School, and thereafter, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. My military service would start several years after I had arrived at Chapel Hill. I was majoring in chemistry, and it seemed that what I needed to do was take a break from Venable Hall, where the chemistry department was located, and I chose to join the National Guard. And in fact, I would come back to Morganton, a block or so away from where I was born, and raise my right hand and join our military, the 120th Infantry, 30th Infantry Division, here in Morganton. Captain Bingham was my company commander. For 2 years, I would be a light infantryman until I attended Officers Candidate School at Fort Benning, Georgia, commissioned 6 October 1961. And I would then be assigned as a platoon leader to again, still in 120th Infantry in Siler City, and upon graduating from Chapel Hill and starting to work for Northwestern Bank in North Wilkesboro, I would be transferred to North Wilkesboro as a platoon leader. And in July of 1964, I always wanted to be, if I could, to be an airborne ranger. Impossible to get that, though, in the National Guard unless you were assigned to a position that required that. And I now found a unit that if you joined, one of the requirements would be to be airborne qualified. So I joined a Special Forces unit, 16th Special Forces Group, in Charlotte, North Carolina, July 1964. September 1964, I would find myself at Fort Benning, Georgia, becoming airborne qualified. Airborne qualified, to be a paratrooper. Many people do not care to do that. Some do, fortunately. And those units that are airborne qualified have a great spirit among them. And to become qualified, normally you go to Fort Benning, Georgia, the home of the infantry, for 3 weeks. The experience of those 5 jumps at Fort Benning, Georgia, I arrived in the 2nd of September, graduated on the 23rd of September. Georgia in September can be as hot as any place there can be. So it was hot, and the cool air when we were up in the air was in the aircraft was just great. But by that time, the lane graders, the black hats, we referred to them, NCOs, sergeants, non-commissioned officers, they had a will over us by then that we just about do whatever they told us. At that, and I was a second lieutenant, but that made no difference. And we would suit up, shoot up, and off we went for 5 jumps that week. And we tried to get them in as quickly as we could in case bad weather would come. And they seemed to do a good job at this. But we up in the air, the doors would open, just noise. But by that time, we had been so trained, there was no second thought of what we're going to do. We're going to go out of that door, but they had trained us to do so many things, how to hold ourselves and how to fall, the parachute landing fall. We hoped that it would all work out, but we really didn't have much choice here since we'd already volunteered for it all. So out the door we went, and I had 5 jumps in the landing zone on Friar Field, just across the Chattahoochee River, all part of the greater Fort Benning, Georgia. Unfortunately, it seemed each time I landed, doing my correct PLF, I would land on the canteen. My hip was so sore by the end of that fifth jump, I said, I just don't know if I can continue this. Of course I did. I would end up having 85 jumps through my approximately 10 years of airborne assignments. I arrived in Vietnam 13 July at Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base and received my assignment. I was wearing my green beret in hopes I would be assigned to Special Forces, and fortunately I was, and went to the headquarters at Nha Trang in 2 Corps and spent a couple, 3 weeks there, and would get to meet a fine group commander, Colonel Rowe. But this would be his last couple days as group commander because of, and I do not and have never quite understood about the incidents that involved the Special Forces at that time. In the 23rd of September, I would be assigned as the detachment commander of a camp called Camp Burke A236. And there was some concern because of spot reports being determined by our ASA detachments that the NVA were coming down on the Cambodian side. They had already spent August up at Ben Het on the tri-border area, pretty well beaten up, but they could get their replacements coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail over in Laos and Cambodia. And they were fully manned by the time they had gotten to across the border from 2 camps, Camp A239, A236, Duklop, and Bu Prang. They had come down the year previous and had just about overrun Duklop, the camp there, and they looked like what they want to try to do the same thing. Some reason, somehow, intelligence was showing they were also interested in Bu Prang. Why, it was sort of hard to see, because we were not a straddle and infiltration route. But in early November, we were under siege for 45 days until the 23rd of December with the NVA, not VC, the Viet Cong or local guerrillas, but regular Army units from North Vietnam. And our camp was surrounded by the 40th NVA Artillery Regiment, portions of it, and all of the 66 NVA Infantry Regiment. And it was for the good luck of having a U.S. Air Force, along with a lot of others, are also Army gunships, to come and give us the needed help to keep from being overrun, and we were not. Our camp was pretty well destroyed, and so they decided to build the last complete A camp there nearby, about 7 miles away. And after that, I would stay as the A-Team commander from the 23 September to approximately the 20th of May. Our B-Team commander had come to me and said that I would have to now, having spent 8 months as a detachment commander, that I would now be requested to come back and be a staff officer. And I asked him if I could extend and possibly be assigned to a conventional airborne unit. He said, yes, you may try. And I did that and would be assigned to the 173rd Airborne Brigade, the 503rd. In fact, it would be the 3rd Battalion. And I would go there, become a company commander from the first day of July until the 23rd of January of 1971. And I requested once again for an extension, and this time I wanted to be an advisor, and I would I'd take my 30-day leave, my first 30-day leave. Back in June of 1970, I returned home to North Carolina. This time, I elected to go to Africa for my 30-day leave in February, and I go to the Republic of South Africa, Rhodesia, Malawi, Kenya, and Tanzania. While in Tanzania, I had the opportunity and took it, and I would climb Mount Kilimanjaro and come home and go through the new assignment process and then become a battalion senior advisor. And we were advising the ARVN Airborne Division, and my battalion was the 11th Battalion of the 3rd Brigade. Upon completing Vietnam, I returned home, spending 11 months back at Fort Benning, Georgia, and then from there being assigned to Europe, Germany, at Krosno, and soon a second assignment as a headquarters company commander of the 3rd Battalion, the 509th Infantry, and we were We were bringing down our full brigade of airborne located at Lee Barracks at Mainz, and it was going to be a heavy battalion, and there we would be reassigned, relocated to Vicenza, Italy, as the 1st Battalion of the 509th Infantry, and that unit is still there, and it has now been redesignated as the 173rd with 2 battalions. Returning to Vietnam and orienting ourselves, North Vietnam, South Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, known as a tri-border area because the 3 countries come together here. Down here is Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City, and my personal involvement of my first assignment with Special Forces as an A-Team commander, my camp was located up in this little cul-de-sac, and at the time I was there, or was assigned there in September of 1969, Cambodia was off limits, and it was very interesting to be assigned here, and I could look due east to see Cambodia, of course north and west, 5, 7, and 9 miles from where our camp was located. The camp was, there was approximately 500 soldiers there, a 12-man A-team, 2 officers, 10 enlisted, 10 sergeants, Special Forces A-team, and the rest of the majority of the camp was made up of what was referred to as CIDG, C-I-D-G, Civilian Indigenous Defense Group, and they were civilians from this region that had been had volunteered to come, to be trained, to be paid, receiving food, medical attention, and then they would pacify this country or this area against the insurgents coming from the VC and also the NVA. After the siege, our camp was pretty much above ground, and it had been just about destroyed to the point it was no longer usable. And so we would actually move 7 miles from our campsite down to this small corner here on QL 14. QL is abbreviation in Vietnamese meaning highway. And we actually moved 7 miles to our southeast and came within 2 miles of the border. So that's where we would be. And in the latter part, I would depart May of 70, and then for reassignment to the 173rd Airborne Brigade. And the camp would be closed and given to the Vietnamese Rangers in October of 1970. The first officer killed in Vietnam was from Asheville, North Carolina. His name was Don York, and he's number 9 on the wall. And also, it's interesting, he was to be the first West Pointer killed in Vietnam. And he would be a member of my 3rd unit that I was assigned to, MACV Team 162, the advisors to the Arvin Airborne Division. But I think that is one of the nicest, finest memorials. And what surprised me later was the system would come up with a memorial for the Korean War veterans, casualties. And I don't know why they did not come up with something similar to the one for our Vietnam, because our Vietnam memorial has all the names there. And I don't think our Korean memorial has that. I think having the names, individuals can come and make rubbings. I think that is so great, and people can come, and I think in most cases they can come and actually touch the names. I don't think the wall is so high. It might be down in a far corner, but in most cases you can go and touch the name of the individual that you would like to come and visit with.